have traveled far to come to give you an incredible talk. And I'm not going to take up any more of their time. So without further ado, please welcome Ari Salvatore and Tracy Hickman.
The D, and you be the D.
I'll be the whatever. Is this on? It is.
Okay.
Look at that.
Wow.
Oh, there's lights, and it's bright. I can't see any of you. No.
This is like an interrogation room.
Yeah.
So, ask us your questions when we get to them, and we'll give you the straight answer because we're blinded. What can we do?
Put your fingers down.
I grateful to be here, especially with Bobby. He's absolutely, bar none, one of my favorite people in the whole world. I love him, man. He's my brother. And I'm grateful to all of you for showing up here this morning. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Reason that we're here today is because Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson loved miniature wargaming. And they saw miniature wargaming, and they saw the opportunity for story and fantasy and how they could do something new with those things. And so standing on the shoulders of all those war games, all those games that have been played before, all the Kriegspiel, they created Dungeons and Dragons. They stood up on those shoulders and they lifted. Well, Bobby and I, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We stood up when we saw the work that Gary had done, that Dave Arneson had done, that Zeb Cook and Jeff Grubb and Douglas Niles and Mark Akers and so many other game designers had done. And the artists that were there, Larry Elmore, Jeff Easley, Keith Parkinson, Clyde Caldwell.
A little bit of talent there.
There's a little bit of talent there. And I came in, and Bobby came in, and we stood on those shoulders. We saw opportunity for story in these games that we loved. And so we stood up, and we lifted on the shoulders of those giants. And we brought story into game. Now here we are. We not only brought story into game, we didn't just make game. We built worlds. And it revolutionized games. It changed games. Now, here we stand. And here you are with us. And we are going to tell you what we know about where we are right now. We're going to tell you what we know about creating universes and how you can translate that into experience for players.
We're going to do all that in an hour. We don't know much.
We're going to do this in an hour, Bobby. That's right. Okay, let's start. World building advice, Bobby. What do you tell people?
The first thing that's always been important to me is that two things you need if you want to be a writer, and two things that would improve you if you want to be a DM, right?
Yeah.
A knowledge of history and a love of learning, right? So the advice I give to anyone, the first advice I give to anyone that wants to create a world, fantasy world, is, I mean, there are a lot of elements, but the basic thing to me is that old Mark Twain saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure rhymes. And what I mean by that is your world is going to look very different, but there has to be a measure of sameness to it, to the experiences of the people who are going to enjoy your world. If you look through human history, you see it's the same conflicts, it's the same ego, it's the same religion, it's the same everything over and over again, causing conflict, which is part of a story typically. And when you're writing a fantasy book, the first thing you're asking people to do is suspend disbelief. There are dragons, there's magic, so you're asking people to believe that you can throw a lightning bolt out of your fingers or something, right? So when I'm building the world, what I try to concentrate on is not making them suspend disbelief in the world itself, and the economies, and the way the nations or the kingdoms or whatever relate to each other, because that's the way humans work. And so the familiarity of that helps them not have to suspend disbelief on everything and can draw them in. And whether I'm writing about a dwarf or an elf or a dark elf or an ogre, any character that I want the readers to feel something for, or my players to be afraid of or feel something for, they may have different trappings, but they've got to have that human element to them that people could connect to. If you don't, your heroes will fall flat if people can't aspire to them. And your villains will fall flat if people have no idea why they're villains. So those are the things I focus on first whenever I'm building a world. What atmosphere do I want? When I wrote the Cleric Quintet, I took a course on Chaucer because I wanted that pre-Enlightenment attitude for Catherley. Those are my basics. Those are my basics, ground level advice if you're building a world for a campaign or a book.
That's one of the things, actually, that we do in world building as well. I've always thought of it as caulking, but what it basically means is if something existed in history, there was a reason for it.
Yes.
There were like complex social, economic, cultural reasons for why it existed that way. So when we want to do a knighthood for Dragonlance, we want to do the Solamnic Knights. Solamnic Knights, the name, by the way, came from my ski bindings when I was young. I loved Solomon bindings, and it just kind of made its way into the game.
Love it.
But if you wanted an order of knighthood, you don't start by trying to think up an entire set of rules for a knighthood. What you do is you go and you take a look at orders of knighthood that existed, chivalric orders that existed in the past.
And they all rhyme.
Yeah. Yeah. The basic rules for those, you can adapt it. You can model on top of that, and it will ring true because it was true. And all the reasons that those rules came into being already exist underneath what was built.
But they're not all named after ski bindings.
No, but they're not.
Right.
Which is why mine's different.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
But the thing is, that's what I mean. So a person who understands history, a person who lives in the real world, doesn't have to stretch their belief system to follow why you have this order of knights and what they're all about. When I was doing, I had done the Icewind Dale trilogy first, and then people started really glomming onto Drizzt. And so TSR Mary Kirchhoff had told me at the end of Halfling's Gem that this is the last book. So tie it all up. We're gonna, we're done with these characters. This was in 1989, and seriously. And so that's why at the end of the Halfling's Gem, right, they go back and they take Mithril Hall. That was supposed to be the fourth book, the retaking of Mithril Hall. But tie it all up. So I tied it all up. A lot of good stories about that. Had a dwarf named Dagnabbit, got Eric in trouble because whatever. But then Mary called me up and she says, you know what? We're getting a lot of letters about this character, and people want to know where he comes from. And so, all right, and she signed me up for a trilogy, the Dark Elf trilogy. And I'm like, okay, so I've got, Queen of the Demon Web Pits, Descent to the Depths of the Earth, those old modules. And the Fiend Folio was just coming out, so I saw they had like a 2-page entry on Drow. And I'm like, okay, I've got this. What else you got? And she said, nothing. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. And she said, nope, we're giving you carte blanche to create Menzo Berenzan. I had already named it when I created Dritz. I don't know why. To create the Drow Society in the Forgotten Realms. And so, and I had the backstory on the Drow. They're an evil race. The reasoning beings that I don't buy that. People have agency. That's why you're a reasoning being. You have agency. And so I came up with an alternate idea for how the Drow began in the realms, and I kept it to myself for years. But what I thought of is, I'm an Italian kid from Massachusetts, and I watch The Sopranos, and I know what they're going to say before they say it, even though we didn't have Big Mob or any of that, but it was the same cultural thing. And so I'm thinking, how can I come up with a society that everybody outside it thinks of it just as evil? But inside it, there are codes and there are rules that allows it to survive. Because if everyone's just evil, there's only going to be a couple people left alive. And they're either going to love each other or kill each other. Probably both, right? So I got out my copy of Mario Puzo's The Godfather, and I based Menzo Berenzan on the 5 families of New York because it made sense to me. Mm-hmm. And except it was the godmother, right? And the Drow Society. And that's how I created Menzo Berenzan. And then I evolved over the years with hints in the books and notes in the background what I thought was the actual history of Menzo Berenzan that was going to answer the question that Dritz had to live his entire life with of, is this evil inherent, or was it extraneous to me, to our people? Our Drow evil. He had to live with that. And I developed, it took me 20 years to develop that fully.
Yeah.
But again, it rhymes. It's something I could look at and say, this makes sense for this city. And it worked.
And so what we're saying is that you need to be a student of many things.
Absolutely.
And it just doesn't come out of whole cloth. You're not responsible for creating every rock, every concept, every society, every relationship. All of that can be drawn from history, can be drawn from study. When we did,
and then you can put your own little flavors on it.
And then you put your own little flavors into that make it, that give it the magic, that give it that awe-inspiring wonder that you're looking for in a place. But it's so much easier to start from something that is a solid piece and then shape it into what you need it to do. Ravenloft, the castle Ravenloft was a good example of that. I studied medieval architecture for quite some time in order to create Ravenloft, because I wanted a castle that would work, that was functional. And I found out what parts of the castle and keeps existed and why they existed and what their relationship was. There's a hierarchy. The higher up you go, the higher class you were. And designed the architecture so that it made sense in terms of medieval keep. And it resonates with players, and it resonates with DMs, because underneath all of that is that echo, is that rhyme with something that's
we
real.
know what this is.
Yeah.
And again, you don't have to go out and get a floor plan of Treefels or Mardenberg or something. And if you're doing something like, for example, what would a Gith castle look like, right? Mm-hmm. Then you can do something really different. But even as you're doing it different, it has to make the same kind of sense. You know? You know, you don't put the bathroom above the kitchen. Just don't. Especially then, because that's why the higher people were up higher, right?
That's exactly right.
Because something flows downhill.
Everything flowed down. Yeah. Well, Dragonlance also is an example of this in that when we started the world for Kryn, I started with a landmass, and then I put offshore flows, streams, and I understood where the heat was coming from in terms of the water and where it was going.
You had to do a little geographical study.
I had to do some geographical study for that. From that, I was able to plot the weather patterns.
Yep.
As they crossed the land and the mountains were here, and we knew the water was going to fall on the leeward side. And from that, then I was able to plot the rivers across the landscape. And then from the location of the rivers, I was able to plot the spread of civilization, because civilization spreads on rivers.
Yep. That's why all the cities in the south are at the base of the mountains instead of on the coast.
That's right.
It's because of the rivers.
Right.
That's where the boats could get to.
And so we do the spread of civilization. We did about 4,000 years worth of history in the spread of civilization, and then we threw a meteor into it and wrecked all of it.
Right. And that's the beauty of all of this, by the way, is so much of what you just said, there's a million things the readers will never know.
That's right.
But that background is what makes everything actually make sense on the top level for the people who are reading the books. It's not an accident. And one of the things that bothers me now, or it doesn't bother me, but it scares me, I think, for the future of the genre, for the future of writing, is the shortcuts that are being allowed. Because, like, I'm writing a series right now. I just finished up my Demon War series, and it's a Buccaneers books. It's sailing ships, 16th, 17th century sailing ships. I've spent as much time studying them as I have writing the dang books, and it's been awesome. So many cool things you learn, like how to take a barbed arrow out with goose feathers, right? I mean, you learn these things when you're doing it. And that's the joy of being a writer, to me, above all else, is the immersion, is learning about all of these clever things that you never would get in a high school history class or even a college history class in many times. And it just, so again, first thing I tell anybody who says I want to be a writer is the journey is more important than the goal, because that's your life. And to me, it's been just one big how I make sense out of the world journey.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of tools do you like to use in creating worlds?
Well, I like maps, and I want to make the first book I wrote. I made a map, just made a map, because I know how to make a map. I play Dungeons and Dragons, and the guy looked at it and he says, "This map, you can't do this." And I said, "Why not?" He goes, "That river forks downstream. That's not going to happen." What do you mean it's not going to happen? It's not going to happen. Okay. So yeah, I like the maps as just to try. Once I'm the kind of guy, like if I'm DMing a game, I'd rather find a map than make a map, because I'm not good visually. Like, I can't do a Rubik's Cube to save my life. They make no sense to me. I just throw them at people. If I find a map, then that map, my brain starts filling in what would make sense on the map. Mm-hmm. So starting with that. And then the other thing I like to know is like the folklore around, because the other thing, if you're doing a fantasy series and you're using magic, the reader has to know the boundaries of your magic. Otherwise, it's just one big Deus Ex Machina fest, right? You know, and there's nothing worse than having the whole world about to come to the end because the dragon's beating the heroes, and he pulls out a sword that's enchanted to kill this dragon, kills the dragon. There's nothing, those things don't work. Unless you do them on purpose, like with Jarl Axel, but that's a different story altogether. So I want to bound my magic system. So like, that was for me, it was more translating the D&D magic system for the Dark Elf books and the Cleric books and all the books I did in the Realms, because you can't really stray from that too much. I play around with it, but you can't really stray from that. But when I'm doing my own world building, like with Demon Wars, I wanted to use gems as the basis of magic. And so I went back and I looked at all the historical, this is what this gem does, you know, in all the folk tales and the fables and it helped me build a magic system that made sense. Because again, the reader has to understand the boundaries of it. And you can't make it too big. You can't make. That's why I always play with the gods in the realms too. They're not gods. They're just people interfering, causing trouble. They're super beings causing trouble. And if those are the types of things I start with. And then, like, for example, in Demon Wars, Catholic kid growing up, fascinated by the name of the rose and the schism in the Catholic Church. And I did the schism in the Abelican Church, only it was over the gemstones instead of wealth. But it all came back to power. So again, it rhymes with history.
Yeah, wait. I was, I've completely lost my train of thought.
We're old, Trace. We're
Derailed.
old.
We are old, Bobby, and this happens very often.
What was that character's name again? Oh, yeah. Put her in. And then my son will look and say, Dad, she died 3 chapters ago. Get away from me. We're old.
I always, I love to be organized. I once had attended a conference and they were talking about maps in fantasy worlds. And I think it was Orson Scott Card actually who said that the maps of fantasy worlds very often look like the map of your summer vacation. You know, you start in home and then you went to the mountains and then you went to the sea and there were dragons and then you came home again. And the world is small. The problem is that worlds aren't small. They're enormous. In fact, they're far bigger than games or books will allow, really. Especially in a fantasy realm, because transportation is just slow.
Yeah, that's the other thing. That's the other thing that you always keep in mind. Like people are like, why is Dritz having a hard time in Kalimshan? You know, he's the hero and da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, how would they know?
Yeah.
How would they know? The world has gotten small for us. You know, you want to see what cities on the other side of the world look like, you can look them up. They're there. You'll see all the pictures. You want to go, get on a plane and go. Fantasy world's not like that. You know, to write a letter to someone and get it there 7 months later is different than texting, right? And these are the kind of things you got to keep in mind over the economies and just the mobility when you're dealing with a fantasy world as well.
Yeah, and spread of information.
Yep.
Economies, all of that. All of Middle Earth, if I understand correctly, is about the size of maybe Europe, closer to the size of England.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of that tableau takes place in a very relatively limited space.
When I auditioned for the Crystal Shard, they sent me, the only printed thing they had was Doug Niles' Darkwalker on Moonshae. Great book. But in the original, the only map was these tiny little Moonshae Isles. And so they said, come up with a story and whatever, and a sample chapter, and you know, they wanted, because they had read my other book, but we couldn't adapt it, and so they said, we want you to audition. Mary did. And I came back with a story, and I figured, you know, these are tiny, and Doug's characters dominated, so I thought they were going to do kind of like what they did with Dragonlance. So I used one of Doug's characters, Dareth, to introduce the hero of my book, Wolfgar. And then I sent it in, and Mary, I got accepted, and then Mary goes, yeah, but we don't want it set on the Moonshae Isles. We want it in the wider Forgotten Realms. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. There was no internet at that time. This is how old we are. There was no internet. You know, in fact, when Mary called me to reject the book I had sent, she goes, I really like this, and I want to get you working here, but, you know, can we set this in the Forgotten Realms? And I said, what are the Forgotten Realms? They hadn't announced it. So the only thing they had that was printed was Doug's thing. And,
Yeah.
and I'm like, she goes, Bob, we don't want you on the Moonshine Isles. I'm like, you want me in the water? Because, oh, we never sent you Ed's original maps. I'm like, uh-oh. So they sent me Ed's original maps. And they were a stack of like 8.5 by 11 pages, like this high, with like one would have a line with a tree, and a couple of mountains, and there was no key. And they weren't in order. So I'm working finance at the time, right? White shirt, button down, keep your hair off your ears. And I'm working for the controller of this high-tech company. And he comes in, he's, Bob, we're going to lunch. We're going to lunch with Dale. He's the president, right? We're going to lunch. Let's go. I'm like, I got too much work to do. All right. We'll catch up with you later. As soon as they left my office, I pushed all the furniture into the hall, and I took out Ed's maps. I took off my tie, and I tied it around my head like a bandana, and I get down on it, and I'm setting up these, trying to figure out these maps. Lost track of time. I hear behind me, what are you doing? It's the president of the service department, the controller, and the head of manager of service. And I told them what I was doing, so they took off their ties. I tied them around their heads, and they got on the floor with me, and we spent 2 hours putting Ed's maps together. I loved working for those guys.
I was just
Talk about world building, right? That's physical world building.
That is. You reminded me, we were talking about magic a minute ago, and you reminded me of working on magic for our Deathgate series. Margaret said we need a whole new cool magic system.
Yay.
Okay.
I'll give you an hour.
Yeah, I can't. I got lunches. I already had lunch. We can do it. So what I ended up doing is that I read a lot of popular science books on quantum theory and Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and uncertainty as it applies into chaos in physics. Jeff Grubb once famously defined quantum physics for me as figures, open parentheses, and God does something, close parentheses, figures.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated with this idea of quantum theory and uncertainty and chaos, and that led me into a parallel universe theory and fragmented universe theory, all of which became the two competing magic systems in the Deathgate series, and it was the underpinning and foundation for everything that happened in that series. But I had to do the work. I had to do the research, and then, as you say, find that rhyme in there that made it resonate.
And then the other thing you do when you're building this is critical. You have to come up with a spell that your monsters can use to kill the PCs in your party.
You're all about killing PCs in the party, Bobby.
Love it.
Yeah, I know. I like to organize, and I like tools. I like maps, but I don't want to take too much time.
Absolutely.
Doing those. So I use Incarnate online to build my maps. It doesn't limit my creativity with the maps at all, but it lets me produce a really good looking map that I can edit and move things around in a relatively short period of time. I also am a huge fan of World Anvil as an organizational tool to keep track of relationships of characters and places and things and concepts and objects when I start getting overwhelmed with the relationships of all the different pieces. Yep. And so I use World Anvil heavily. They're both online tools to keep myself organized. But the great thing about both of those tools is that it doesn't limit me in my creativity.
It probably helps, because if you're like me, I can't draw a stick man. Like I said, visually, I just don't work. For me to sit there and draw a map, I'll spend more time just trying to make the mountain look right, or even like a mountain, not like a V, and an upside down V. And I can get so hung up on the mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm.
So having tools to smooth that definitely helps for me as well.
So we're in an age, coming into an age now, where tools can easily become a crutch.
They can become a crutch, and they can become absolutely debilitating to your abilities. Writing is like anything else, right? You exercise it by doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you cross that line, then you're in trouble. You'll lose. One of the things driving me crazy is every time there's an update, Copilot pops back on my Microsoft Word. And if I wanted to write like a programmer at Microsoft, I would have been a programmer at Microsoft. And the worst thing about it now is, the budgets for a lot of the publishers have been cut so much that everybody's under crunch time. And I can read my copy of it and know which questions Copilot asked. And it's like, they say you're supposed to write S-T-E-T, stet. I just write piss off. They want everybody to sound the same. They want everybody to, well, you shouldn't use G-R-E-Y because G-R-A-Y is more common. Piss off. You dangled a participle. I can dangle a lot more than that. This is a sentence fragment, yes, and if you put the verb to be in the middle of my fight scene, I'm going to show you why it's not supposed to be there. And these are the things that don't tie me up with mechanics when I'm trying to find my voice.
There was a time when computers first, this is how old we are, before computers, when word processors first hit the scene.
They were just typewriters that gave you like search.
Right, but there was huge resistance to writers who used word processors. They felt that if you weren't banging keys on a Selectric, or better still, an Underwood manual, then somehow it had tainted the word on the page.
It's funny you say that, because when I got my first rejection letters back in like 1983, there was a writer in my hometown, and he was very well known in the town. His name is Robert Cormier, a young adult writer. Wrote I Am the Cheese, The Chocolate War. He was one of the most influential young adult writers of the 20th century. He lived through the woods from my house. Mm-hmm. And he was very out there. He'd go to the scout meetings. He'd go to the high school. He'd talk to classes. And in the movie I Am the Cheese was his actual phone number. Huh. I called him. I was devastated. I got some horrible rejection letters. And he kept me on the phone for like 2 hours. And he said to me, look, if you take nothing away from this, remember always, character is more important than story. If you have great characters and people care about them, you give them a hangnail and they'll be on the edge of their seat. If you have characters nobody cares about, they're not going to care about the danger. And Bob and I became dear friends. When he passed, I took a seat on the library board, actually. They said, Bob, why don't you get on the library board? I said, I don't have time. I'm out of town. No, it's Bob Cormier's seat. All right, I'm in. Mm-hmm. But he, to the end, and we're talking in the 2010, was still writing on his IBM Selectric. Yeah. He would not go to a computer. But I think that has more to do with the way you train your brain. Because I wrote my first book longhand, right? I couldn't type. When I was in high school, if you were going to college, they taught you how to write in little blue books. They didn't teach you how to type. If you were going on the business track, like all my sisters who were brilliant, but they have to be secretaries because they're women. That's the 70s were wonderful.
This is how old we are.
60s and the 70s were wonderful times for if you're a white guy, yeah. And so my sister was like could do 120 words a minute like that. So I actually, Sheila, I'll give you $10 to type this for me. And she typed my book. And then I had to go to the library and hand copy 450 pages at a nickel a piece.
Yeah.
But then when I got my first computer, it was a PC Junior. I'm like, oh, this is better. What do you mean the disk is full? I only typed like half a chapter. So a stack of disks like this, and then it ate one.
Uh-huh.
So I went to get it repaired, and the guy, by this point, they're like, oh, we don't repair disk drives. I'm like, but I've got all these things. He says, no. He opened the closet. He had a stack of PC Juniors. He says, take a new one. We don't sell these anymore. But then I trained my brain to go faster with the on the computer. You train, like if you ever watch someone who plays video games a lot with the controllers, I don't know what they're doing. Hit the X button. What's the X button? The one that says X. What? You're dead. Never mind. Okay. But you train yourself in different ways. So for the older writers, they have been spending years training their brain on the speed of a Selectric, which is a very different thing than the speed on a computer, even a PC Junior, right? So they couldn't retrain their brain to that speed, or didn't want to. And I get it, because I resist a lot of the new things like Copilot, right? I don't know what that's going to do to change things in the future.
Well, I think the important thing for me in what you're saying is that Copilot is going to be great at making you mediocre. It's going to be great at making you not stand out from anybody else.
You'll never spell gray, G-R-E-Y.
And that would be a tragedy, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I wrote my first Demon Wars book, the title is The Demon Awakens, right? The title was The Dactyl Came Awake. You can't do that. And they changed it. And I looked at the published convention, I said, if Ray Bradbury had come to you with something wicked, this way comes, you would have titled it Something Bad's Coming. Turning a phrase just a tiny bit. The classic example to boldly go, right?
Yes.
That's the classic example. You split an infinitive, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't ever ask me to take a grammar class, because I just color the paper red and throw it at people. It's like a Rubik's Cube to me. Because I never looked at the English language as a set of rules. I look at it as a set of tools. So one of the things that I've been fighting with editors for the last 5 years with is, you use too many commas. And I say, I do it on purpose. You don't need a comma there, because this isn't, shut up, I don't care. I want a comma there. Why? Because I want to stop the reader. When someone's reading a book, if they see a comma, they stop. They take a breath and they keep going. I don't want them to go through and miss this part. That comma is an emphasis comma. There's no such thing. There is now. These are the kind of things you learn to do
Because
when you're exercising your brain to find your voice.
That's right. It's your voice. And finding your voice is maybe the most critical part of not just writing, but also in terms of the design. If you're doing games, whatever you're putting on the page there, and it's not even just the read aloud text. We're talking about the tenor of the entire thing. It is a communication, and your voice in there is going to communicate far more than just the words on the page. It's one of the things about the written language that I find so compelling is that we write these texts, and we can write a 150, 200, 300,000 word novel, and the entire file size of that is smaller than the pictures I take on my phone.
Yeah.
because the information, there's just not that much information in there in terms
But
of
it wasn't
data.
at first, and that's why they got away with they got rid of the two spaces after a period.
Oh, and that's kind of, I still put them in.
Yeah, me too.
So,
It's habit.
but the great thing, the wondrous and magical thing about the written word is that when it gets into your hands as the reader, all the sights and the sounds and the smells and the experience and the meaning of the text is all found in the white space in between those words. It's that electric arc that takes place in your mind as the reader that literally creates anew that book or that game text.
A reader brings, was it C.S. Lewis that said that the only person who can determine the relationship between a reader and a book is the reader of the book?
Yeah.
People say, oh, the way you described that dragon. And I'm like, oh, yeah, thanks. And I walk away and say, all I said was dragon. You described the dragon. I don't tell them that. I take the credit. But, you know.
Yeah.
One other thing is that you will also learn that how, like over the 38 years, excuse me, almost 40 years.
Almost 40 years, Bobby.
Yeah.
Come on.
Tritz turns 40 next year. Ouch. Language has changed. You know, when I was in college, the two rules, the road to hell is paved with adverbs. And if you have to attribute dialogue, you're not giving the characters enough voice, right? No. That's changed. That's changed because of the internet. Message boards, everything on them is attributed. And if you don't do that, even sometimes in basic text with two people talking, you'll lose readers. So you have to keep putting in little cues here and there just to help keep the reader on track. You never used to have to do that.
Yeah.
If you had voices, it wasn't even the voices. If the story made sense for this character to say it, the sophistication level has changed. And this is not a pejorative against, you know, kids today even kids, 40-year-olds, kids.
Kids.
Can take their phone and carry on 10 conversations at a time. My brain could never have done that because I didn't train it that way. But when you're training your brain that way, the language changes for you. So if you don't attribute dialogue, you'll lose readers. And of course, the problem with that is when they do the audio books, they have to do them word for word. So you've got a guy who's using these great voices. You darn, or I'm a bearded gnome, said Bruner. You know, it's like, you don't need to say that, but they have to because it had to tie up with whisper sync, right?
Yeah.
You had to say every word by contract, every period, you had to say every word. He said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said.
There's a lot of hesitations in Bobby's readings because they have all those commas to deal with.
Yes. Yes. Well, but I have Victor, and Victor,
Oh, well, you're right.
yeah, I know where he lives, so he listens. And then the other thing, the adverbs, right? It became very apparent to me that people don't get sarcasm like they used to.
Yeah.
I'm an East Coast kid. I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. If everything was sarcasm, that's how we communicated. You know? But now I've noticed that, and then I'm wondering, how come we've lost this? And why do I have to go to hell by using adverbs now? And then I thought of it. Emojis. Emojis are adverbs.
Yeah.
And how many message board flame wars stopped because someone didn't say JK or put a smiley face, right? It started flame wars on message boards. So I now use adverbs again. He said sarcastically. And older readers go, well, no crap. Of course he said sarcastically. I'm like, yeah, but, you know, the kids.
We're going to take a few minutes. If you've got questions, we
Yes.
should answer questions for you. Let's see. Well, we can't see anything.
So they're on you.
If it's on you
There's
guys
someone here.
to figure this
He's got a
out.
white shirt. I can kind of see him.
Yeah, he is. He's waving frantically.
I actually probably don't need this, but okay.
For the back.
All right, Tracy, Bob, good seeing you again. What you said earlier with, kids not understanding context and things like this. I'm not that much younger than you guys. So over your journey of creating these worlds, creating your novels, are there any things through history, themes that you've put into your books that were common back then that you regret because today's day and age lack the ability to distinguish that this is all pure fiction, and then they accuse you of various things that are not true because, again, you're writing fantasy?
You want to take that first? Or you want me to take that first? I got you.
Yeah, I figured you had something to
got
say
it,
about
yeah.
it. You go right ahead, Bob.
I want to take the blame and the credit. Thank you very much. If I'm getting a rise out of you either way, then my book affected you and I did my job. And I'll leave it at that. So no, I'm sorry, but like after I started writing books, when one of my books went out of print, called the first book I'd ever written, the one I wrote longhand, and they said, you want to rewrite it. Because in it had the Bermuda Triangle, right? And I remember, so it got re-released, and I said, no, I do not want to, I read it, and I'm like, oh God, did I really write some of this? But I said, no, because a book is a snapshot in time, right? I don't want to change a word in the book, because that's, if you're reading my books and you go back and read Echoes of the Fourth Magic, which was the first one I wrote, that's where I was at that time when I wrote that book. And I remember when that book came out, I got this review in England. Oh, God, does anyone write about the Bermuda Triangle anymore? No, they don't. But this was in 1982 and 83, and Leonard Nimoy had a series, remember?
I do remember that.
And this was like the rage. You know, Bigfoot, UFOs, Bermuda Triangle. This was like the rage at that time. So no, I understand what you're saying, and if they don't get it, then maybe they'll take a look back. Nothing drives me crazier than when somebody goes after a politician, for example, on either side and says, you know what this guy said in 1973? Do you know what everyone said in 1973? Do you understand the world? And nobody gets the context. When I was in high school, if you were a guy that wasn't like macho guy, you got the crap beat out of you daily. It was awful for a lot of people. I was the smallest kid in my junior high. I got the crap beat out of me every day. Mm-hmm. Then I grew about 8 inches, put on about 80 pounds. Started boxing. Then I became a bouncer to pay him back. But no, it was a different world. It took me, when I turned in the first draft of the Crystal Shard, Mary Kirchhoff, I love Mary, my editor, she came back at me, she goes, you don't have a named woman in this book. I said, it's a frontier town. She said, did you really just say that to me? And I realized, you're a freaking sexist. Me.
Yeah.
It was like this awakening for me. I grew up with 5 older sisters, like I said. One was a salutatorian in the class. The other was a valedictorian in the class. The other one, a nurse practitioner who should have been a surgeon. Another one, masters in English. Brilliant. All of them brilliant. And all of them held back because of the culture around us. And I admit, when I started writing, I was a sexist. And so were they. Because we were all trained that this is just the way things are. So when I look at the world now, if they go back and read one of my early books and they don't get it, go find out about it. That's on you, not on me. And, if you want to throw barbs at me, go ahead. I don't care. I'm just making shit up and hoping you enjoy it. And that's the way it is.
Margaret and I have had a very long career. And the first book that we did together was Dragons of Autumn Twilight. And they've read it. Okay, everybody's read it. But it was our first book. And it's not very good. If you compare it compare it
I know exactly what you're going to say.
to our later works, which have better construction. The characters are, the plots are better built. It's all the craft over time developed into a much better craft, and the books are better constructed. And there was a time when we went back and we were doing Dragons of the Dwarven Depths, which was actually a book that was cut from the original series because TSR was absolutely certain that it wasn't going to sell anyway, and they didn't want to spend more money on more pages.
Printing and storage.
And printing and storage, yes. So they asked us to cut the end of that off. That's enough. We have enough words now. We have a whole book.
Right.
And so we went back to do Dwarven Depths, and Margaret said, "I've been rereading Autumn Twilight." And she said, "It's very different from how we write now."
Yes. Echoes of the Fourth Magic, same thing.
Yeah. And she said, "Do we try to write like we did back then so that it'll match, or do we?" I said, "No, we write with the craft we have because we're writing it now." When I say that Autumn Twilight isn't a very good book, it is a brilliant book. It is a beautiful book. Absolutely. And it is a beloved book, and I am eternally grateful for that. But it was written in its time.
Absolutely. And what I would also argue is as you get older and you're on book 148, no, it's 25, whatever, what you lose in energy, you've made up in craft.
Yeah.
Right? Starlight Enclave was, I did the same type of thing in Starlight Enclave that I did in Homeland. It's like an echo of Homeland, of a Drow city without Loth.
Mm-hmm.
That series. Finest Edge of Twilight, the new character, Drit's daughter, is like Drit's story from someone who grew up in his shadow. And I think that, these are better books in some ways. They're more sophisticated. I've learned a lot. My characters have grown as I've grown old. And, but the energy of the early books, the time. I mean, when we started writing our books, our audience, and I know I'm right about this, was mostly teenage, college, military guys. If you came to my early book signings, if there were 30 people there, it was 22 high school kids and their moms who drove them.
Mm-hmm.
Now I go to my book signings and it's like a Fleetwood Mac concert, right? You got the grandfather with his son and his granddaughter, and they're all sharing the books, which is the best feeling in the world,
awesome.
I might add, when your families are sharing your work. Then you know you've actually done something worthwhile in the world as a writer. But you change, and your writing gets better, and the books that you know that you did your best on might not be your best-selling books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People ask me, what's your favorite book? And I tell them, best book I ever wrote is this. And they go, what the hell's that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, that's what I expected, right? The Immortals?
Yeah, The Immortals.
The Immortals.
Best book I ever wrote.
Damn right. How many have heard of it? Clap. Not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Thank you.
Great book. Absolutely wonderful book. And so prescient, I might add.
Yeah.
Scarily so.
Frighteningly prescient. Oh, yes, please.
He's young.
Strictly from a craft standpoint, when you're writing, and I've noticed a lot of writers do this, even George Lucas. When I read both of your books the first time, I didn't catch it, but going back and rereading, the story starts in the middle. The story always seems to start in the middle. The characters have a backstory. Is that like a deliberate crafting choice so you can grow the story in either direction, or did it just develop in your mind from that point forward?
The guy that wrote wish I could remember his name. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He wrote the screenplay for it, and at the moment his name's escaping me. He wrote the Princess Bride.
The what?
Princess Bride.
Goldman.
Yes, Goldman. Goldman said that you should always start late and you should finish early. Always start a scene late, always start a book late, because that's where the action is. Don't explain everything getting into it. Jump in. And don't linger at the end. Get out and let the audience work that through. And I think that that's very good advice. Throwing people into the deep end can be a little bit cold and bracing for them, but at the same time, they are immersed in the action of what's going on right away. So and you can always explain things as you go, and should. But another problem I think that many writers have, and certainly game designers have, is that once they've created all this really great stuff, they want to show all of it.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
And the hardest thing that you can do is to create all of this foundation, all of this brilliant design, and keep it to yourself. It's actually important because it establishes a horizon.
Yep.
And horizons are compelling. We look at the horizon, we think, what's on the other side? What's just beyond that? And it pulls us forward. But if we know what's all over there, and all of it completely, it's no longer a driving force for us. It's no longer interesting.
And if you're writing in a series, it's also job security.
Yeah, that's true.
I finished the Crystal Shard, and I'm finishing it up, and I'm writing the epilogue, and I'm like, this was kind of fun. It's more fun than doing the books every month in finance, and I wonder if they'll give me another one. And so the halfling goes into the town, and he sees this guy with a jeweled dagger, and I'm like, dun, 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 and I just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And I had no idea who this character was that I had just put in there, right?
Yeah.
Artemis Entreri. Who's that? I don't know. And he was supposed to die in the next book, but then I started liking him, so I kept him around. But yeah, you got to end with a tease.
Yeah.
There's
yes,
more.
Right. The other thing, the one piece of advice I think that I would like to leave with you and is every time I sit down to the blank page, and you know how formidable that is, that first page, I always say to myself, you have not yet written your best work. And that's true. Writers have to grow. Game designers have to grow. DMs, you need to grow. We came here to talk about the future of fantasy to a certain extent. That's part of the title here. What? I know, Bobby never cared, but that's okay. The title was Snoozing on the Shoulders of Giants. Are you just resting on what's been done? We stood on the shoulders of giants. And we stood up and we lifted. And we created and we contributed. We hand this to you.
Not yet.
Okay, maybe we're not.
See, the good thing when you get older,
yeah,
you like you say, I haven't yet written my best.
Yeah,
I think I probably have, but I've forgotten it, so I'm going to write it again.
It's the future of fantasy really is you. What you do with it. What you create with it. don't see the tools that are given to you as a crutch. Don't use them as a crutch. They are tools to be handled, wielded, and from which things are supposed to be built. Unique, fresh, exciting, magical, wondrous. You are the future of fantasy. Stand up and lift.
And don't worry about how other people are doing it, because I know a whole bunch of writers, and I don't think any of us do it the same way.
It's true.
You know? Some people want to have, like for me, if I forget what a character was doing, I run back and read the chapters. I don't remember what chapter it was, so I read chapters all around the area where I knew it was, and that immerses me deeper. For other people, their brain is going so fast forward that they love the Scrivener's notes on the side, right? Mm-hmm. So people do things in different ways, and that's okay. But the point is that when you're doing it, don't like, well, I know this worked for George R.R. Martin, so I'm going to write the next Song of Ice and Fire. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to write your book. Find your voice. Find what you want to say. Put your characters under pressure and make them answer the questions that you have about your life. That will make it more than just a book. For me, I call, when I was asked to write they were putting together all the Dritz stories and the collectors, and they wanted me to annotate all the stories. And some of these stories were 30 years old or 25 years old, whatever. And so I started rereading the stories just so I could do the one-page intro. And it was like looking at a photo album of times gone by. Because reading that story put me right back where I was. At one point, we turned a walk-in closet into my office. Mm-hmm. And we still had the clothes in there. So I'm writing and get the shirt sleeve out of my head. But I remembered all of that, and it was just this most wonderful experience. I was going back on my own journey again. It was like looking at an old photo album through my words, even though I wasn't writing about a walk-in closet, right? Yeah. And that's what you want. And so, like, I go back to the first thing I said. Writing is a journey, and the journey is more important than the goal. Creating worlds is a blast. If you need help with things like maps and things, there are things out there to help you now. That's great. But the journey of creating that world is, for me, probably the most fun I have through a book. Go ahead. We got one more here. Yell it.
Real quick. I was thinking, you mentioned the inspiration from things like Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games earlier. One of the things people love about role-playing games is my character finds this, develops this, and outcasts this. How do you balance that character development within your books?
It's not an easy question. I thought you had an easy question. For me, I don't know that I ever think of it that way, honestly. It's funny because when I look back, people say, who's your inspiration? And of course I say Tolkien. Well, Tolkien was my inspiration to fantasy, but really when I look back, my inspiration was Fritz Leiber, Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, because I love buddy fantasy, right? I want to walk down the road with these characters. But I don't really worry about things like that. What I'm more worried about is this character being true to the core of the character? And is this character growing? Like people say, how have you written 40 books about Dritz? Doesn't it get old? It gets old as I get old not that Dritz gets old, but he's changing through the books the way I'm changing. When I started writing professionally, I was 29 years old, and I thought I knew the answers to everything, like most 29-year-olds, and I thought my job was to tell you the truth about everything. And now as I've gotten older, I realize I know nothing about anything. And that's not my job. My job as a writer to engage a reader is to get the reader to ask the questions and answer them for themselves. And so the characters, what I worry about with the characters is not whether they get a magical sword, because I can always destroy it if it gets too powerful, right? It's not whether, well, if you killed an orc in this dungeon, I got to kill an ogre in this book. I got to kill an ogre in the next book, and then at 5th level, I got to fight a hill giant, and then I got to do, you know what I mean? I don't look at it like that at all. And if you read the books, you know that some of the deadliest foes can be a smart kobold or a skilled orc, right? Or a skilled gnoll or something. It doesn't matter. You're not trying to climb a ladder like that, whether it's magic or whatever. You're trying to develop the characters. You're trying to find growth in the characters. You know, I mean, at one point in time, Dritz says, orcs aren't all evil. They're not. And Catti-brie says, my leaky says they are. And Dritz says, my leaky's not my god anymore. I don't agree. Those are the kind of things I look for, not what they have in power level or anything like that.
What Bobby said.
I have witnesses. That's the first time Tracy has ever let me have the last word.
You have no idea how hard that is. I am going to be going down to Margaret Weiss's booth in 1529 down in the exhibit hall. I'm going to be signing down there. And please come down and see us. We have a Dragonlance War Wizard, which is actually only available here. It'll be on sale everywhere like next week or the week after that, something like that. But this is the one place that you can get it. So please come, and if you've got more questions, by all means, come and ask me down there. It will slow the line up and give me a break.
And and I'm heading over to Author's Alley, I guess, to do my only signing. I'll be the guy lugging the suitcases because it's there to a meeting to the plane.
Yeah.
So if you got something to sign, I'll be there.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful journey.
Enjoy the con.